start by saying and spelling your first and last name?
My name is Joseph Forcina, F-O-R-C-I-N-A. I am the Chief of the Sandy Coastal Management Division at North Atlantic Division.
Okay. Can you describe what your division is responsible for?
The Sandy Coastal Management Division is responsible for the restoration of the whole coastline from Maine down to Virginia, resulting from the impacts of Sandy. It's a program that consists of approximately 150 projects spanning 5 different program areas, from our flood control and coastal emergencies program, which primarily deals with restoring previously constructed projects to their design level condition, to our operation and maintenance program, which deals primarily with the restoration of federal channels impacted by Sandy, and then heading into construction of previously unconstructed projects, which totals approximately 18 projects valued at $2.7 billion. In addition to those efforts, we have ongoing investigations of feasibility studies that we need to complete. There are approximately 17 projects within that program, and then a smaller effort in our continuing authorities program dealing with smaller type projects to provide, let's just say, immediate relief in some locations.
Okay. Describe what the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is doing to support the recovery from Hurricane Sandy.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has developed a comprehensive program to address the impacts of Hurricane Sandy. It is involved with many communities, in partnership with many communities, in restoring those communities as quickly as possible to a level that will minimize risks from future storm events. And it is an extensive program comprised of a short-term program, and then additionally what we are terming a longer-term effort. The short-term effort is comprised of near-term coastal restoration, and that's basically restoring existing projects that were in place prior to Sandy to their design level condition. We're also addressing impacts to our navigation channels, and those 2 efforts comprise what we're terming our shorter-term program. Longer term are those efforts that require some additional, more robust analyses, and the legislation requires us to ensure that these efforts are still economically justified, environmentally acceptable, and technically feasible, taking into account resiliency and sustainability. And so it is a comprehensive effort. It involves investigations, it involves construction, and certainly we really, I want to personalize this a little bit, we really want to work ourselves out of a job as quickly as possible. Many of us, this is just not just a job. It's, we have been impacted, our families have been impacted, friends' families, and we want to institute proper measures as quickly as possible to bring down the risks that some of these communities are currently working under.
Joe, can you talk a little bit about the comprehensive study?
Sure. The legislation requires us to undertake a systematic or a systemic look at the whole coastline from Virginia up to Maine. And that comprehensive study, which is a 2-year effort expected to be submitted to Congress in January 2015, the 2-year anniversary of the legislation, the comprehensive study will not lead to a recommendation for an implementable project, but it will lead to some further analyses and development of almost an a la carte menu of potential alternatives that we could bring to bear to further limit the risk of these communities. Many times the Corps of Engineers asks, what is the difference between flood protection versus risk management? Okay, and I can certainly say from an engineering perspective, we can never totally protect a community for all possible eventualities. What we can do is implement risk reduction measures to reduce the risk to those communities, and that's what we intend to do. And part of that risk reduction effort requires education, letting people know that, yeah, there may be a project in place here, but you can never totally eliminate 100% of the risk associated with living in some of these low-lying communities.
So can you describe why this program is important? Hurricane Sandy is obviously the largest that the North Atlantic coast has seen in a long time, but why not just wait and see what happens in the future rather than spending all of this money and resources now?
Hurricane Sandy, at least the impacts of a Hurricane Sandy and what the Corps and many other agencies are undertaking, really allows us the opportunity to, first of all, clearly explain to folks the reason why the Corps of Engineers is involved in flood risk management and flood risk reduction in coastal communities. Many people may associate a beach with strictly recreational reasons. You know, you see people sitting out on the beach, sunning themselves, but that is really not the reason why we implement these projects. The reason why we implement these projects is to minimize risks as much as possible to the community, and very little of the formulation and the analysis of those projects goes into the recreational aspect. Certainly there are some ancillary benefits that lead to people being able to utilize those facilities, but the primary reason is to protect communities such as the South Shore of Staten Island, Fire Island, and Eastern Long Island, areas that people may associate with, especially Fire Island, associate with the affluent, but the project, once again, is for flood risk management and reduction.
Can you talk about the overall dollar figure for the program and kind of the magnitude of that within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers?
Sure. The final legislation provided approximately $5.3 billion to the Corps of Engineers to address the impacts of Hurricane Sandy. Of that $5.3 billion, approximately $4.3 billion is targeted to a North Atlantic Division area of responsibility. And as I mentioned, it comprises of approximately 155 projects spanning a number of programs, and those programs address both short-term needs and longer-term needs. So when taken as a whole, I think that we have the resources necessary to do it, and we have the plan to get it done.
You know, the Hurricane Sandy program is a national commitment, and we're doing everything we can to fulfill it.
Yeah, sure. The Hurricane Sandy program really is a commitment on the part of the nation to ensure that we minimize risk to low-lying communities such as what we have in the North Atlantic Division area of operation. It is an investment on that, and obviously it's an investment that we do in partnership with the states and the local communities. So there is, if I can sort of put it in context, at least from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers perspective, on a yearly basis, our whole civil works program is roughly $5 billion. So this is an additional commitment by the nation to ensure that these areas that were severely impacted by this event, and hopefully not many future events, that we have the resources and we have the technologies and the capabilities to ensure that that risk management is implemented.
Just a little bit about how critical partnership and working closely collaboration is to get into the program.
Critical for the Corps or the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to implement these risk reduction measures is partnership with state and local communities, with academia, with many organizations. We don't do this alone. Congress charges us with implementing these projects, but all of it is done in partnership with many entities, whether it's an environmental resource agency, whether it's a cost-sharing partner from the state, a cost-sharing partner from a local community, the need for real estate, where we really need the help of the local communities allowed to do that. So the bottom line is, this is done in partnership. It's not the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers coming into your community and say, we're going to institute this project. No, the project is instituted in partnership and collaboration with those communities.
Great. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, if I can just certainly repeat, or at least re-emphasize the importance of this project. It really is, it's primarily for flood risk reduction, okay, to reduce the risk to those communities. And also for many of us, this is not just a job, it really is personal. Many of us, our families, friends have been impacted by the Sandy events and other events. And we really are looking to work ourselves out of a job as quickly as possible. So I look forward to doing that and hopefully when we're here next year that we can say we've done this and we're ready to go home.